Hey, thanks for listening. I'm Deanna Fletcher, and my guest this morning is Liz Warom, who alongside her husband Mark is the co-owner and co-founder of skincare brand TEMPLESPA, which has come a long way in 15 years, now established as a luxury lifestyle brand with exceptional products and experiences that restore both body and soul. A committed Christian, Liz has worked alongside other notable visionaries, including Anita Roddick, founder of The Body Shop, and Richard Branson. Liz and her husband were responsible for Virgin V in its inception. She's certainly become a leader in her industry and marketplace. I wanted to ask what drew her to this life of entrepreneurship. Was it always the big plan?
I would love to say that I could re-engineer this whole story and say that I had a game plan when I was young and ended up here. I think by default I ended up here because I was one of 4 children and the youngest, and I got married very young. I got married when I was 17, and so further education wasn't really on my agenda. But I happened upon a cosmetic company and ended up being a part-time sales consultant and found my niche. I just found something that I could do very well. I'm quite good at selling. I'm quite compelling, I guess, and persuasive. And I started working with women and found that that truly was my calling, just to bring forth women in their abilities and see things in them that they couldn't see in themselves. And so I've grown a career that has been around working with women and helping them develop their abilities in the sales arena.
You and your husband, Mark, worked with some pretty well-established brands before launching your own business. You were with The Body Shop, you launched beauty brand Virgin V under the auspices of Richard Branson. Really, you did a lot, and then you went out on your own. That must have been a culture shock, starting from the ground up like that?
It was a total culture shock, because the job of creating a brand and a business and then building a quick team, having a very large fund that we've had in the past, but deciding to go it alone, and then suddenly the shock of sitting opposite your partner who you love to pieces, but you think, do you know what you're doing? And he goes, not really. Do you know what you're doing? And it's like, oh my gosh, we really do need God to come through for us on this one. And so, yes, we literally started with the two of us, with a concept, with an idea. We had taken a sabbatical for a year after we left Virgin, and we spent most of that time in the Mediterranean. And I think that only God could have known why we chose that region of the world to go and absorb ourselves and live for a while, so that we could give birth to an idea, which was a brand that was based on the diet and lifestyle and culture and architecture and everything else of the Mediterranean. So although it's a British brand, it's got a Mediterranean heartbeat that completely resonated with me as quite a warm person. I think I really related to that being the basis of an idea for TEMPLESPA.
Well, tell me about why the name, and what are you hoping that the products do for people? Because I feel like with you, it's more than just beauty. It's more than just taking care of your outward.
That's so true. I think obviously the temple is a sacred place. And so I truly do believe that life is the most precious gift that any of us can be given. You only get one. So I think what we do with it and how we preserve it and look after it is of paramount importance. Spa for us is another word for space, your space, to look after yourself and give some space to your own self. And so TEMPLESPA comes together perfectly as a name that describes what we do. But always from day one, we've had a sense that we want to give people the message, you are precious. You just have to love who you are, love who you are and who you can become. And so the message of our brand is kind of a metaphor for that, really. It's very self-assuring, it's very positive, it's very warm. We take a lot of our names from scripture. So although that's not a prerequisite, and clearly our marketplace is way bigger than just the Christian community, but we want it to be a message of goodness.
Would you say then that your faith impacts not just your brand, but how you do business as well?
It really does. And for me, faith is like breathing. It's not a piece of clothing that I put on a Sunday or just say, oh, today will be a Christian day. It's who I am and it's who Mark is. And so it helps us make wise choices and it helps fashion the way that we work with other people and allow some of the fruits like goodness and kindness and patience to surface.
Let's talk a little bit about women in business, specifically. Women trying to balance so much, trying to do it all. Do you feel like that concept that women can have it all, do you think that that's achievable?
No. I really don't. Way too much TV promotes this, that, the woman leaves home at 5 a.m. to go to the office and is leaving the kids with someone else and just trying to do it all. I think you have to make some choices. I think sometimes that as women, we do multitask. I think we have amazing capacities, and that's not that men don't. But I think that as women, we're very blessed with being very textured in our life. And whilst I think there are seasons when you do feel like you're handling a lot, I think you have to be quite wise about choices, because at the end of the day, most of us as women put ourselves way down the agenda, and if we're not well, no one's well, and we're the glue that holds the family together, that holds the business together, that holds life together, frankly. And so I don't think you can have it all, but I think that you have to make some choices and go with those and do the best with what you've been given, and listen constantly that God might be just whispering, turn that volume down on that or turn the volume up on that, and just remain sensitive, really.
How would you respond to perhaps unnecessary pressure that's put on women in business?
Yeah. Well, I think this is the problem, that for many, many years, women have felt like they've got to be super achievers just to even come to an equality with men. Whereas my view is we're all different. Men are men, women are women. How beautiful is that? And we all have our equippings and we all have our strengths. And let's not try and be each other. And I think women have to be kinder to one another as well and help facilitate one another and be there and just be affirming and boosting. And being able to speak into each other's lives with love, but with truth. And if we think a mate is kind of trying to do it all, just either if we can do something about that, step in. If not, just help them take a little sneak and see perhaps the chaos that they're living in. I see that a lot. I work with a lot of women. I work with over 2,000 women, and I know the guilt that most of them live with all of the time. It's just something that I think that's always there. You never feel you're doing anything 100% well. And that's the great challenge. So
how do you support them as a female boss who obviously can see what's going on?
Maybe it's a sign of getting older, but I'm a little more direct with people now. I kill with kindness. I speak very well of people and to people, but I'm quite clarified sometimes when I can see that someone is they're running a million miles an hour and they're not breathing and they're not stepping back and they're on this treadmill of trying to do everything. And I think I'm just very honest. I get permission to speak into people's lives. I wouldn't just go blundering in, but I just get people to stand back a little bit and see the view from where I'm standing from and saying, what do you see? And sometimes I think when you're out of a situation, you see much clearer than when you're in the situation. Something interesting, a few years ago, something very significant happened to me. I was feeling very pressured, very overwhelmed, and not really feeling that God was coming through for me, in my opinion, of course. And I was in my swimming pool and I was in the water and I just cried out to God. And I said, I don't feel you. Where are you? And he very distinctly said to me, do you feel wet? I said, do I feel wet? No, I don't feel wet. And he said, get out of the pool. So I climbed out of the pool onto the side of the pool. And he asked me the same question. He said, do you feel wet? And I said, yeah, I feel wet now. And he said, that is because you're out of the pool. And it spoke such a deep thing in my life that made me realize that when you're in something, we're not always best placed to see what's going on, but stand out of it and then ask God to just highlight to you, enlighten to you where you're at. And it's amazing that suddenly you can see more clearly.
Thanks for your company. I'm Deanna Fletcher, and this morning we're in conversation with Liz Warom, the beauty entrepreneur and Christian business owner who, together with her husband Mark, founded luxury skincare brand TEMPLESPA. Growing a business requires so much of your time, energy, and effort. For many couples, the idea of balancing the work you're passionate about with raising a family can seem a daunting, if not impossible task. Along their journey, Liz and her husband did make mindful decisions concerning their personal lives, and not starting a family of their own was, well, part of their journey.
Yes, I can't think there was never a sit down. There was never one of those discussions where you're having supper and say, hey, how do you feel about having children? I mean, for many years, we just said, oh, one day. And then time went on and we suddenly realised, you know what, we are so happy. We are so happy. I've been blessed with many nieces and nephews who I love with a passion. And some, of course, we're closer to than others. But I never felt very maternal. And it used to worry me. It used to make me think, what's the matter with you? Because I would love my brother's children, but just didn't particularly ever feel like I wanted them myself. I think also, to be frank, I was running a national job, which meant also I was working overseas for quite a lot. And I would imagine what it felt like to be leaving my baby with someone else, and I couldn't reconcile it. I just couldn't. And that's not because I think it's a bad thing to have a nanny. Good for you if that works for you and you make that decision as a couple. It just wouldn't have worked for us. And so I guess then there comes a point where one day you think to yourself, gosh, if I had a baby now, I'd be 45 when it's 10, or I'd be 55 when it's 10. And then suddenly one day as a woman you wake up and realise actually maybe those days are over. And it didn't upset me in the slightest. I feel blessed. My husband feels exactly the same way. So it's not like either one of us necessarily wanted kids. And I think perhaps we've modelled what it's like, and it's okay to be a couple that doesn't have babies. I think it's incredibly sad to want them and not be able to have them. So fortunately, that was not the case for us.
So it's not an area where you feel like you've missed out, achieved so much in one area and missed out in another?
Honestly not. I think it would be hugely cute to think what a little combination of both of us would have looked like. And now sometimes I will look at a little child and I say, oh, Mark, you know, our little boy would have looked just like that. But it's a momentary thing. There's no sadness. I had an aunt who was extremely close to, sadly she's passed away now, but she was my aunt. She was single and she was like a mother to me, and I was like a daughter to her. So I think fortunately I've got some nephews that are like sons to me. So, you know, I don't feel I've missed out at all. No.
Do you feel like you're a woman in business, or are you just a person in business?
Yes, I'm a person in business. I love women. I'm called to work with women. I have some amazing men that I work with, and in many respects, it's the best person for the job. But I have been called to work with women, and I have about 2,000 TEMPLESPA lifestyle consultants that are self-employed women, some of whom work a couple of hours with us and some who it's a full-time job. And I love working with them because I think that most women are working with latent potential tucked inside them. And I seem to have been gifted with this ability to almost see that in people and speak into women and see potential in them and just bring them forth in their talents and their gifts and their potential. And so, yes, I am a woman who happens to be in business, or I'm a business person that happens to be a woman. Whatever way you twist that around, I feel just hugely blessed that, you know, God gave me these skills and gave me a love of business and an ability somehow to take these rare talents and use them for success.
I do think that's such an interesting conversation to have because, you know, online now, there's one of the big hashtags or big conversations is girl boss or boss babe or whatever it is. And I heard somebody say, yeah, but when you're differentiating between a woman in business, you are just a business person at the end of the day, aren't you?
Yes.
And is it kind of more detrimental to what we're trying to achieve by separating women out rather than actually the seat at the table is for everybody?
Well, that's really perceptive of you to say that, because what I do find very sad is when women think they've got to behave like a man in order to get on. And that's so sad because we, as I say, I think we're all gifted in different ways. And I just think women should feel strengthened in who they are and affirmed in who they are, and they need to surround themselves with men and women that will respect that. I'm very fortunate. I've worked with some incredible men, and I've worked with incredible women, and I empower women. But it matters to me if a guy I work with, and I know it's his kid's sports day, I would be as quick to say to them, "Go home. You've got to be there with the children." I'd say that just as much as if it was a woman. So I'd like to think that I'm very conscious of equality, but I'm also very conscious for a lot of women, they're on the back foot. And so that needs balancing.
Yeah. What are some of the most difficult lessons you've had to learn in business?
I think one of the biggest lessons that I regret, I don't really have any regrets, but something I wish I could have done better, is in the early days had a greater level of trust that all would be well, that God would come through. We probably started TEMPLESPA with a very limited fund, which meant that I functioned in lack quite a lot. And having had worked for companies that had very large budgets, it's very easy when you're using other people's money to be lavish and to think you're making great choices. And when there's a limited fund, and that could be business, it could be church, any organisation, that really causes you to put your back against the wall. And actually, it's amazing when you've got a limited resource, what you then have to do to work super hard to overcome that. But I do wish I'd have enjoyed those early days more, rather than feeling always just on the back foot and feeling, I almost dreaded people saying, so how's it going? And being a very positive person, I always said, oh, amazing. But it was probably, oh my gosh, is it ever going to take off? So it's not a regret. It's just I can't have that time again. And my advice to other people would be, got to know what you're going into. You've got to pay the price. You've got to count the price, but then go for it with all your might, and just trust God and trust your own ability as well. That's a heady mix.